I grieve with you. I grieve with many, many others that feel lost really in all this. Because if you haven't lost somebody from COVID, it's very hard to understand because in a way they are just a number, just a death, another death that has occurred in our country, similar to someone getting hit by a car or, any other accident you may hear about. But the fact of the matter is this was a preventable thing. So to know that she could have had a chance had things been done differently, I guess that my anger goes towards that as well.
There was the last normal day, the last day that things were the way they were before they weren't anymore.
We kind of all rushed out of the house and said a quick goodbye. And, little did I know that would be the last time I hugged my mom.
He yells and tells me he's getting ready to go. He said, "I'm okay. Just stay here. I'll be home in a few hours." We tell him bye and he leaves. And that was the last time we ever saw him.
It's like the minute that helicopter hit the air, it just hit me what I was watching, because I knew he wasn't coming home and he knew he wasn't coming home.
For me, I took it more personally because I'm a nurse practitioner and why can't I save him? I can help all these other people, and why can't I save him?
Telling us that it was time, we needed to make a decision, we need to go ahead and just take him off the ventilator. And I was like, how do we know?
One thing I like to tell people is that if you lose somebody to COVID, your need to talk about the person you lost will outlast other people's desire to hear about it.
We make sure that our family members and loved ones' memories lived on. That's really important to me, is that people don't forget. I don't want to forget any of it.
So talk about them. Talk about them till people are sick of hearing about them, because as long as you're still talking about them, they're never far away.
And the last thing that my mom said is, she said, when you get to heaven, we will look for each other.
Hello everyone. You're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, forthosewelostpodcast.com, and click on the contact button and reach me that way as well. Also, if you'd like to help support the show, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. That link is also in the show notes. All right, let's get started. I've got a wonderful show coming up for you. Today, I'll be talking to Christina in Arizona. Christina lost her mother, Catherine Rodriquez, to COVID on June 22nd, 2020. And she and I have a lot of similarities in our stories. Christina has found a grief support family in her volunteer work with Marked by COVID. For context, we recorded this episode on May 24th, 2022. Christina is the Arizona lead for Marked by COVID. She also mentions the Million Trees Project and our collective hope for a national COVID memorial. Those links are in the show notes below. And with that, I'd like to welcome Christina to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So you live in Arizona.
Yes.
And you lost your mom in July of 2020.
Yes,
And what day
it
exactly?
was the 22nd.
Oh, wow. When we talked on the phone, we have a very similar story about our moms. And so it's been with me. It's been with me since we talked on the phone because I don't often talk to people who have experienced such similar things as I did.
Right.
And so where I want to start is I usually start all my shows in March of 2020. And I would like to start there and have you talk about how you first heard about COVID and
Mhm.
what happened where you live in Arizona and also what was going on with your mom at the time.
Okay. So let me see, flashing back to March of 2020. I was the same as many of us, turning on the news and hearing about an outbreak in China, and then it had come to the U.S. My mother at the time had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I was in the midst of really trying to find doctors and treatment for her. And hearing about COVID, I think we all started to really hear about it in the U.S. when it touched down in Washington State with the outbreaks among the assisted living homes. That seems to be kind of the kickoff of that for a lot of us, unfortunately. Living here in Arizona, we didn't see any outbreak per se at that time, but we were kind of bracing as a state, as many others were, to see how this thing was going to go. So I was really playing the part of, you know, kind of trying to figure out my mom's health as you shared that experience with me. Unfortunately, both of our moms had Alzheimer's, and it's a bit of a tricky thing. So that's where I was in March.
And what was your mom living in a memory care or assisted living or with you?
She was living down the street from me. The Alzheimer's diagnosis came very suddenly, and so she was living down the street from me, and I would go over there and spend time and bring her groceries. When it came to the following month, about in April, that is when I had to admit her to a memory care and assisted living facility.
Was the facility open at the time to visitors, or was it something where you had her go live there and then you couldn't go in and visit her?
The facility was open. I could visit her up until probably about, I'd say, 3 weeks until before she passed. I was able to go and visit. I was able to get her all set up. I brought in, photos, clothes, things that she needed to try to make it as homey as possible. And it was kind of business as usual until one day this thing hit hard here, and her assisted living was closed, and myself and many others who had relatives in the facility were locked out.
Mm. Yeah, that I find myself amazed by that just because my mom's place closed down March, I believe it was March 15th.
Hmm.
And we got very little notice at all. I actually was hiking and watching TV when I got back to the hotel room where I was, and I saw the CDC briefing, and
Hmm.
a woman there had said something about how they were going to close down long-term care facilities. And I looked at my husband and I said, "That's mom. We've got to go back."
Absolutely.
We left and drove the 3 hours back to the city, and I called them and they confirmed, sure enough, they were closing the very next day. And so I went in and saw my mom twice on that last day, but after that it was all windows, all windows.
Yes. Yeah, for me, although it did happen kind of suddenly, as far as, it was one day I went to visit her. I had spoken with her the day prior, and I had told her that I was going to bring her pizza. As you may know, with Alzheimer's, eating habits are comforting in a way. My mother liked to eat the same things, liked to be around as much familiarity as she could. And so that was the discussion I had about bringing pizza. And when I went to go do that, the facility had closed. Arizona's response to COVID is an entirely different discussion, but I do feel it was a delayed response, as I saw other states closing their doors, such as you mentioned, with assisted living and shutdowns happening. It seems like our governor, our health department dragged their feet on that a little bit. And that is why, in a way, I got a little bit more time with her. But then, the doors were shut on me and I never saw her again.
Yeah. How old was your mom when she was diagnosed?
She was diagnosed at 68. She was young.
Was it? Yeah, so it was early onset.
Yes. And when it hit, it was, we got a phone call one day with my husband at the time, and my mother had called him and she said that she did not know where she was, that she had gone to take out the trash in her apartment complex and she couldn't find her way back. So we went over there, and both of us thought, well, we better get her into the hospital because she had no recollection of me, him, anything that was going on. And with COVID being growing, a hospital is not obviously the place that I wanted to be with her, but that is where we were to get her the treatment that she needed.
Yeah, that's my mom has Alzheimer's or had Alzheimer's from a traumatic brain injury. So for her, she had a few concussions, and then she had some bleeding on her brain and had surgery and was never the same after the surgery, but she was always a bit of an odd lady. She was very eccentric. And I just thought, oh, she's getting more eccentric as she's embracing her older age.
Right.
And so it came on slow, but we went through that too. She parked her car in the mall parking lot and went to work at Baby Gap because she loved little babies, and couldn't find her car and had security drive her around the whole mall. And she was pulled over by a police officer for circling the block so many times because she didn't remember where she lived.
It's a horrible disease. It really is.
It is awful. And for you with your mom, for it to come on so quickly and just all of a sudden her not know who you are.
Yes, I mean there were little signs, and I think as children, even though we are adults, we're still our parents' kids, and we want to look at the best scenario of things. And I think, my mother would have certain forgetfulness, and I would attribute that to her age or different things. But when the Alzheimer's showed its head, and there was no ignoring, what was in front of us with her. And which made it also very difficult to put her in a assisted living, because in Arizona, as I'm sure other states, assisted living does not always cover Alzheimer's care. And she needed that extra care.
Yeah. So what happened in July? So they locked the doors to the facility, and what happened with your mom?
They locked the doors to the facility, and they locked the doors, I would say mid-June. And I got a call that had happened, and I was trying to get, at the time they were doing everything they could, trying to get tablets into the facility to set up a FaceTime call. But as you know, with an Alzheimer's patient, that can be very difficult communicating. Basic communication can be very difficult. And so I think in the midst of trying to explain to my mother, here, hold this tablet, your daughter's going to come on, it was very confusing. So we had a few failed attempts at that. And then I finally got a hold of someone down there. It came out in the paper that they had an outbreak. I did not get a call. No family member did. And I picked up the morning paper and saw that her facility had an outbreak. So I called down there, and they had confirmed this must be maybe the second or third week of June, confirmed that she had it. And my mother was also an asthmatic. So I was very worried about her respiratory. And this is still when we weren't sure exactly what we were dealing with COVID.
Yeah.
So as time went on, I did the best I couldn't see her except for through a screen. We did that a couple times. And then with COVID, the last conversation we had was she was asking me why everyone around her was wearing a mask, why everyone looked weird. That's the best way that my mother could explain it in her head. And I explained to her that there was a virus, but that she was going to be okay, because what do you say in that situation? And about a week later, I got a call that was it, that she had died in her sleep. She didn't suffer. I take solace in that. I don't have much to take solace in this situation, but at least that. And I got the call that she was gone. And that was it. There was nothing else. It was come get her things. And my mother, who I had, we had growing up with my mother was we weren't always very close, but we had reformed the relationship in my adulthood. And so the person I knew as mom was as simple as just a phone call that she had died. It was as if she had no identity, no. And that's why I do some of my advocacy work with Marked by COVID, because these people are not just a number. They're someone's mother, grandmother, brother, sister, someone. And we sit here filled with all these memories of them. But for a healthcare professional, it's just business to pick up the phone and say that they have passed. So I never got to say goodbye to her.
Oh.
And that pains me every day, every single day. I wish for her not just to be here, but at least that I would have been able to tell her truly. I told her I loved her, but there's much more to say. But you never know that you'll be in the situation that it'll be the last time. You never know that. So that's where a lot of my grief lies, is the fact that I did not get to say goodbye.
Yeah. So you knew she had COVID, and then all of a sudden they didn't keep you informed of how she was doing,
No.
doing. They just
No.
told you she passed away. Oh my gosh, that
was it. And this was as you know, this was pre-vaccine. This is when we were starting to say, well, wear a mask, but we weren't really sure. We didn't have the data we do now, and we didn't see how bad it was going to be. So no, there wasn't much they could do. I think from what I gather, they tried to isolate patients as much as possible, but there were no measures in place as far as dealing with this kind of crisis in our healthcare. There just was nothing in place for that. So I think a lot of people just tried to do the best that they could by separating. But as you know, this disease is very aggressive and very deadly. And that was kind of it with her.
wow. You're very gracious. I do have to say that, because I understand logically that they were doing the best that they could, and that they had an outbreak, and they were dealing with a lot in there with no real guidance. But do you experience a lot of anger around that?
100%. I have anger not towards the people who were caring for my mother, because at the end of the day, staff does what they're told in many instances. My anger goes to the downplay of this virus. It goes to the former president. It goes to my current governor, because we really needed, as a society, when this thing hit, we didn't know what to do. Nobody did.
Mhm.
And I think in times of crisis, you look towards those supposedly leading you, and you hope that they'll take things seriously. So to hear, this was the time when we were hearing, oh, it's just a cold, don't worry about it, it's not a big thing, and here people are dropping dead. So that's where my anger is centered, really.
Yeah. Were you able to have a funeral or a memorial service?
I did not. My mother did not have a lot of family, and because of her COVID diagnosis, a large part of Arizona was cremating. Tucson, where I live, one of them. So that was the next call I received, was that I needed to pay for a cremation. I never got an option for a funeral, nothing like that she needed to be cremated, and that was kind of it. And I scattered her ashes where I felt best. I had my own moment, but it was a moment alone, just like it was a moment alone when I found out she died. And just like for the rest of my life, because of COVID, I will have moments alone without my mother.
Yeah. Oh, Christina, my heart breaks. I couldn't even imagine. I had some video calls with my mom, and I was able to go see her at the window. It was hot, and I mean, it was even hot here in Oregon. I can't imagine a window visit in Arizona.
Yeah. Right.
You would bake right there. The abruptness of it is just heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. It was very difficult, because with me, we first got the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and with Alzheimer's, again, as you know, you never know which way it's going to go. Are they going to is the patient going to be suffering with this for 20 years, or is it going to act quickly and end things quickly? With other, had she caught a cold or other things, as you know, Alzheimer's comes with a lot of other complications besides just the memory. So that was the first thing I was facing. But then with COVID, I didn't expect it. I mean, it's always this thing, oh, it won't happen to me, right? You start to think, well, she's in the safest place she can be. She's in a healthcare facility. They'll keep her safe. And they couldn't. The second the virus got in, that was it. But, I grieve with you. I grieve with many, many others that feel lost, really, in all this. Because if you haven't lost somebody from COVID, it's very hard to understand, because in a way they are just a number, just a death, another death that has occurred in our country, similar to someone getting hit by a car or, any other accident you may hear about. But the fact of the matter is this was a preventable thing. So to know that she could have had a chance had things been done differently, I guess that my anger goes towards that as well.
Yeah. So I think what I want to do is move to like how you coped in that first year, and like how you, because I know that there was a lot for me anyway. In the summer of 2021, I experienced this whole thing of like, on this day my mom tested positive for COVID on this day, because I wrote this down with an exclamation point. I did not know there was an outbreak in my mom's facility until I read it in the newspaper.
And how could that have happened to us? Really, if you think about it, you check your loved one into a facility, you ask for a basic thing, in my mind, a basic thing, just to be updated on their health. And we have to rely on a news source to find out that there's something that has gotten in there that could possibly kill them.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable to me. And especially we share this situation is unbelievable.
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities. It is just unbelievable. They sent an email and said that one person had tested positive for COVID and it was an employee, but they never over the next days said that they had tested everybody, but they didn't have the results yet. And I was thinking, how hard was it to send an email and let us know that you actually had an outbreak? I didn't find out until almost a week after the state had closed the facility down, that there was an outbreak there. It's awful.
And then it's too late. What do you do at that point?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So how did you move through that first year, and especially the next summer in 2021? Did you experience it all over again, or did you find a way to cope with it in a different way?
For me, this also came at the time of me being a new mother. I had a son in 2019. So as many parents, you enjoy the first year, and then as the year goes on, you start to think, well, what preschool might I put them into? Where are they going to go? And because of COVID, that was no longer possible. So as far as grieving, I would say I didn't have much time to do that. My son required my full attention, and that's what he got. Sometimes you have to put, I still have to put on my mom hat at the beginning of the day, regardless of any emotion that I have. That is my job. So the first summer was very hard without her. It was almost, and especially almost reliving it, seeing more massive death, more cases across the country, that made it hard. But then I heard about an organization called Marked by COVID, and which I'm very involved in. I'm a lead here in Arizona for, and that has helped a lot of my grief, talking with other people, sharing my story. It's become a therapy that I did not know that I needed. Is being able to have it is a sad commonality to have, but it's a commonality nonetheless that I've embraced in being able to have that support system and trying to make change so that we are not in this situation again in the future, and we are better prepared for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so why don't you talk about Marked by COVID and the different things that you do for them and where their advocacy lies and how you're involved in it?
Okay, so Marked by COVID was founded by become a dear friend of mine, Kristen, and she lost her dad to COVID, and she's used her grief to channel it into this nonprofit. The current work we're doing now is trying to get a National COVID Memorial Day. We find it almost insulting by our government that there has been not really a statement made or any sort of remembrance for those who have been lost. So my work with them is trying to get legislative support. I'm currently on the impossible mission of trying to find one Republican in the Southwest who will support getting a National Memorial Day. So that is some of the work I'm doing. But along with that, we hold weekly groups, young adult groups for people who have also lost somebody, and just trying to bring them as much awareness as possible, doing things. We're trying to help reinstate mask mandates, a lot of work so that not only are these people not forgotten, but that our response, if something like this hits again, is not going to result in what we're dealing with now. As you know, we've surpassed 1 million people, which is a number that I never thought I would see with anything in my lifetime. Those are numbers you just don't hear them.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to a health crisis. And so our work really lies in not only supporting those who have lost somebody, but continuing to fight so that our loved ones are not forgotten.
Yeah. Wow. So you haven't had any luck finding a Republican, I take it.
I have not, but I live in I live in Arizona, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So we're working hard to do that. We have a lot of support to get a National COVID Memorial Day, but really trying to find support from the other side, sadly, is few and far between. I never looked at this virus as a political thing. To me, it is the furthest away from politics that we should be. This is a health crisis that has killed 1 million people. To me, it has no business sitting in a political debate, but here we are. It has become the forefront of nearly every political conversation in the country. People are using it for campaign platforms, what they're going to do, what they support, what they don't support, and it's divided us a lot. You know, to me, it's how I grew up was the same way many others grew up, is that if you felt sick, you stayed home, or you kept your kid home. Those are sadly not the feelings of today. So because this has become such a forefront in the political world, that's why we're trying to do a National COVID Memorial Day, because these people, they died because of something that was preventable. They died because we did not have measures in place. And I don't think it's fair to let them be forgotten. So creating a National Memorial Day, bringing other awareness, that helps not only in my grief, but others I'm seeing that I work with in the organization to, continue to let their memory live on and remember them for who they are. And as your podcast is, who we lost. They're not just, case number 1, case number 2, they're someone's grandmother, someone's aunt. They're all people. So we need to make sure that they're remembered properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was on the Zoom with Marked by COVID, where they did the vigil in March, and then the more recent one where they marked the 1 million. And so you meet with people weekly to organize and talk about what happened and your losses and support each other.
Yes, we're very public on social media, and so we have people. I just reached out to someone this morning who just lost somebody, and they're looking to kind of have an outlet, which Marked by COVID has been for a lot of people, to not only share your grief, but to help others in sharing theirs. And I think it's important to do that, because with this kind of death, you do often feel very much alone. You hear it on the news, you hear it constantly, that it's still going on or not going on, depending on what you believe, but we are here in the midst of it still. And I think that people within this have not only lost a loved one, but being inside for a year, for most of us, it's taken away our ability to care for others in some cases, and also have that dialogue. So with Marked by COVID, we open up that dialogue, not only to share grief, but to make sure that things are done differently and that people aren't forgotten.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll switch gears a little bit. One of the things that we talked about when we chatted on the phone was your family dynamics. And
Mhm.
and I know that you became a new mother during COVID after your
Mhm.
mom passed away. But
Mhm.
how do you feel like your grief and your advocacy work, like, are different members of your family grieving differently, and has that been frustrating for you?
To be honest, my family I was raised just by my dad and my mom. I'm an only child. So I grieve with my dad. They were divorced, but they were married for 25 years.
Mm.
And he grieves along with me, but there's not um as far as a response in family, my dad and I are both on the same page as far as where our feelings lie with this. But not having a large family also has kind of helped me with my work with Marked by COVID, because they have very much become, over social media, my family who I can talk to, because grief, as you know, is not, oh, well, I'll grieve from 5 to 6 on a Tuesday. Grief comes when it wants to come. And sometimes you don't have anyone around, especially me being an only child. I don't always have someone around to talk to. So it's important to have a support system to reach out to.
Yeah.
And that's what I have with the group of people that I'm very lucky to work alongside with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what do you miss the most about your mom?
I would have to say her laugh, if anything, and it's as simple as that. Um, you miss what you, of course, miss the person, and you miss that they're no longer here. But sometimes in my darkest times, with my grief and my anger as well, with the response to this, sometimes you just want to hear a comforting thing. And for me, that was her laugh. My mother was a very comical person. She could always find the good in things, and she taught me to do the same. But in instances like this, it is difficult to find the good in things. So I miss her laugh very deeply. That was something that just always brought a smile to my face, and it was I miss it very much, very much.
And what was her name?
Catherine Rodriguez
Mm.
was my mother. And I do my best to remember the wonderful times that her and I shared. I have a lot of wonderful memories, but that's all we have now, and that's the hardest part to grapple with. Is anyone who goes through death, whether it's COVID or any other kind of death, knows that we all get those instances where something good happens and you want to pick up the phone, or even something bad happens and you want to pick up the phone. And as simple as not being able to do that makes things very hard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested, when they called you and told you that she passed away and then said, come pick up her things, did they make you wait at all for any kind of COVID waiting period, or did you just go right there and get them?
No, I couldn't get her clothes for probably about 2 weeks, I'd say. And it was, it wasn't a normal thing where I could go in and pack up her stuff. Everything was just handed to me in a box outside of the facility. And I remember thinking in that moment, because she had lived, she'd been in the assisted living. So the apartment she was living in had already been, moved out, and I had put things in storage and all that. And with this, I remember sitting there thinking, this is all that I have left of her, is this box. 60 some years of her life comes down to this. And, people, of course, they are healthcare professionals. They're doing their job. I understand. But with the way COVID is, it's almost like very cold, the way the response has been. Not just with me, but with others I hear, getting a phone call, sitting outside a window, all those usual connections were missed. And that made it even more difficult, because I didn't get the normal goodbye or anything like that. I'm happy that I got to tell her that I loved her. But then with the Alzheimer's, I don't know if she was able to grasp that. I hope she was. And I tell her every day that I love her out loud, but it doesn't bring her back, obviously.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just like to think that wherever they are now, they have all their memories back and they know.
That's beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good way to think of it. She's not ailing anymore from Alzheimer's. I'm happy with that. And to be honest, I was telling someone the other day that I miss my mother dearly, but I'm not sure I would be comfortable with her seeing what the world has turned into with all this, and how divided we are, and how things are happening.
Yeah, my mom didn't understand any of that. She didn't. She knew I was a nice lady who came to visit her, but she had lost all ability to reason. She mostly couldn't talk anymore, and she wouldn't have even known or understood what was going on right now. She always wanted me to come in. I was sitting outside. If the window was open, I had a mask on. If the window was closed, we were on speakerphone. And she always wanted me to come in. And I would say, Mom, I can't come in. Why? And then I would just say, there's a bad flu, kind of like what you did with your mom. There's a virus. I would just say, there's a bad flu. And she would always nod and go, oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. When they called me to come get her things, I had to wait a couple of weeks too. And they had boxed everything up and tried to go over some things on FaceTime with me, which I got very frustrated.
Yes.
Because they moved the camera around too much and I couldn't see. And I was really focused on just a couple of things that I knew that we wanted back. And I didn't know if they were there. And everything that my mom owned was boxed up and fit in my SUV. Like even the shelf and the little chair and everything just fit in my car. But the nurse who answered the door looked at me and said, "How are you?"
Oh my gosh. I don't know what I would have done.
I looked right at her and I said, "I'm here to pick up my mom's things. She died of COVID." And
How would you be?
Yeah, that's how I am. I just thought, like you, I got to know most of the people who worked at my mom's place. I knew most of the people who lived there and I knew their families. And of the 20 people who lived there, 7 passed away, including my mom. And I often wonder, who were those people, the other families? Who were they? And I know the people who worked there loved my mom and they did the best that they could. I felt very, very upset and angry that my caregiving abilities were taken away and I could not be there for her in the way that I wanted to be. And I had to trust these other people. And then once COVID really ramped up that summer, there was so much turnover. I don't know if
Oh yes.
Yeah, lots of different new employees and I just had to trust that they were doing the best that they could.
And I'm sure it's very difficult to do, because really, who can take better care of your loved one than you?
Yes.
You know what they need, and especially with Alzheimer's, that's a disease that the patient needs comforting. And it's very hard to get that from a stranger. But, you and I and others were faced with having to entrust that our loved ones would be taken care of, and that did not happen.
Yeah, I like to say that the people in assisted livings and memory cares and long-term care facilities were trapped targets, just waiting for COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a perfect storm. The biggest thing was social distancing. Well, how can you do that? And if, for example, my mother's facility probably had almost 100 people, I'd say.
Wow.
Two to a room. How can you social distance with that? And then you have Alzheimer's patients. How can you explain to them that they have to wear a mask, or that they have to be moved to this room or that room or outside? Or how do you even navigate that? I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
But sadly, when it hit, it was too late to bring anyone home for a lot of us.
Yeah. Have you participated in other memorials and sent your mom's name in, like to the flags, or done any of those?
Yes, I did do. Million Trees is one that I'm working on with to get a tree here in Phoenix, Arizona. She did have a flag on the National Memorial as well, and those I try to do as much as I can to honor her. But at the end of the day, it will be just a tree and just a flag.
What is the Million Trees?
Million Trees project is, and I hope I have the name correct, but they do other projects, environmental projects mostly, but with COVID, they have tried to do things to honor those that we've lost for it, along with a tree or a flag or some sort of memorial.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I haven't heard of that one.
That's a good one. So with those things and marked by COVID, I'm doing my best to keep her memory alive, but at the end of the day, that's all it is a memory now. That's all she is. I hold her very close to my heart, but I'll never get her back, and I'll never get back how things were handled, with her getting sick.
Do you envision some sort of physical national memorial where we could, say, walk in the doors and
Yes.
learn about the million people? What do you envision for that?
I have hope. I have massive hope for that. Growing up, I took a lot of trips to Washington, D.C. with my dad, and another organization he's involved in. And I remember seeing the Vietnam Memorial. I've been there many times, and I have hope, as many of us do with marked by COVID, for something like that, a physical memorial where you can go and pay respect. So that is what we are working towards, and I do think it's possible if we have the right support for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have one last question that I ask everybody, and I want to know what you say to people who tell you that COVID isn't real.
Oh gosh. That's a difficult one. And I was just told yesterday, in fact, I went to the store and I was wearing my mask, and this lady told me to take off my mask because COVID was over. And when you've lost someone and you hear that, your immediate response, I think, is anger. At least it is for me. In my mind, I get very angry. But I try as much to ignore those things, because sadly there is a lot of ignorance in the world when it comes to COVID. But for the people who say it's over, I would say that not only is it not over, we're still in the midst of it, but how can something be over if people are still dying? We're still seeing death from it. We're not seeing massive death like we were. And I believe that's due to vaccination rates and other, public health mitigation measures. But how can something be over when people are still getting diagnosed and still dying from it? That to me makes no sense. But what I've learned is it's not an argument that I'm going to win or that person is going to win. Well, the thing with COVID is if you either believe that it exists or you don't. And if you don't, it is very hard to turn that mind to see what is really in front of us. And unless you have lost someone, it's very, very hard to understand.
Yeah.
So it's a discussion I kind of ignore, to be honest, more so than not. I'd rather not get my emotions entangled in nonsense. But we are still in the midst of it, and we have to do everything we can to be careful. I have now a 3-year-old son who has not stepped foot in a school because of this, and I'm working against the governor of my state, who is, he doesn't allow us to require masks, doesn't allow schools to require masks, doesn't allow vaccines to be required, makes things very difficult. So that is my daily life here in Arizona. Is I do fight, against a lot of people who believe that either it's not real or that it's gone. And so I do my best to keep safe and stick to my guns as far as what I know and my education with it.
Yeah. Well, and your group is welcoming new people in even now who've lost somebody to COVID. Like that's the thing that
Yes.
you just brought up. There are people right now that are losing family members to COVID.
Right now. Right. Sadly, probably at this moment that we're recording this, somebody
Yeah.
has passed. And what will come from that is someone just like you and I, who feels very lost in this, who has lost a person near and dear to them. So that's where Marked by COVID comes in to kind of say, look, you're not alone in this. We understand where you're coming from. And most importantly, they will not be forgotten. And neither will you. So I think the support group part of Marked by COVID is, in my opinion, some of the most important work we do, because when death comes, as you know, it is a very lonely process, the grieving, even if you could have, 50 family members supporting you, but it's still lonely. No one grieves at the exact same time or the exact same way. And so to be able to have an outlet for that has been very important to me, as I'm sure it has with others who are involved. And I hope that you were able to get some positive feedback from the vigil and other events you've attended.
Yes. Yeah. That the vigil that they had in early March was, oh my gosh, so emotional. I had submitted my mom's photo, and this might actually make me cry a little bit, but when Kristen brought up that the person who put the photos together in those slides of everybody's picture and then their names popped up, and that she prayed over each photo, and as she put it in and said their names out loud, wow. And then when I saw my mom's picture up there, I was just thinking, someone who didn't even know her took her picture, put it in there, said her name out loud, and prayed for her, and then there was her name. The other thing about that was so emotional was seeing the photos and how many people I knew.
It's awful.
Just from doing this podcast and from being on Instagram and social media, being involved in COVID Survivors for Change and Marked by COVID, and just all those faces. And I think I probably sent 20 emails that night to people saying, I saw your husband, I saw your parents, I saw your brother, and just reaching out to everybody, because that's how I heal a little bit, is knowing that there are other people out there that get it.
Yes. And that's the main thing, the names. These people are not just numbered. Yes, 1 million, 1 million, 1 million. You hear that constantly. But it was names to us, people to us, matriarchs, patriarchs of our family, brothers, sisters, cousins. It was someone to us rather than just a name in a newspaper or a number on the news.
Yeah.
It was people who made deep impacts in our life who are now gone.
Yeah. Do you know how many people had passed away from COVID in Arizona when your mom passed away?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay.
No.
I looked it up with my mom and I screenshotted it. She was number 420. And now there's more than 7,000 people in Oregon, just in the state that I live in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The numbers are
staggering.
Telling, and they're staggering, but they're also, in my opinion, very telling of really what this virus has done. Again, going back to those who say that, well, it's not real. Well, how can you say that with that many people in the ground because of it or elsewhere? All you, and that's part of the work with Marked by COVID, is a lot of our frustration with our government officials that, these people are, and we're not bringing the awareness that it deserves, that these people deserve. They didn't deserve to die like this, and they definitely don't deserve to be forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you do work with any long COVID? Because long COVID, there's so many people suffering with that.
We do a lot of that. We do a little bit of it with Marked by COVID. That's some of the awareness we bring to as well. But I don't work with an organization directly for that. But that is another thing that people need to be aware of is, you hear a lot of people say, well, I got COVID and it wasn't all that bad. Now I'm fine. Well, are you really fine? What about the other symptoms that have come about? I've heard memory loss, I've heard cold symptoms, asthma, all these other things that have developed from this virus. So just when you think it's done with you, it may not be, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the work that you're doing with Marked by COVID is amazing. I am glad that there is a place for people who are losing people now, especially in this politically separated, divisive, there doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground. No. And I am glad that the people who are going through that loss right now and feeling isolated and alone and frustrated now have a place to go to get help.
And that's important because when my mother died, I felt like I didn't have a soul in the world who would understand. Mm-hmm. And now, it's unfortunate to share the grief, but it's comforting to know that, when someone dies, it's very easy to say, well, I understand how you feel and I'm so sorry. But to truly understand how you feel because you've lost someone to the same virus is comforting in a way. You don't feel alone, and it's important to have that outlet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a community that we never wanted to be a part of, but some of the best people I know now in my life who are there for me in ways that some family can't even be there for me. I know through the COVID community.
Absolutely. I've formed a lot of friendships. We're sisters in grief, a few of my friends. And like I say, it's a commonality that I never wanted to have with somebody, but it's one that's needed to get through this.
Yeah. Yeah. They're the people that walk through this with you and you're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing because for many of these people, my mother included, died alone. Mm-hmm. So at least on the other side of things, we can find comfort in each other to not be alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think your mom would be very proud of the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope she would be. And the more that we share both of our mother's stories is important. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure your mother sees what you're doing as well.
I like to think so. I like to think that she just sits over my shoulder sometimes and helps me out.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the notes below. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcast, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this show finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.